All right, now we need to add another just kind of reference geometry that we're going to parent our modeled wheel and tire to. So I have my cursor where I want it, at the center of the rigid body wheel. Do Shift A. I'm going to make a cylinder. I'm going to rotate it about the Y, 90 degrees, and I'm going to scale it down so it's about that size. So I can still see everything. I can still see my empty here, my alignment sphere, and I can still see my axle. Okay, and we're going to select that, and we need to name it. We're going to call it underscore, it's not going to be a rigid body, but modeled, it's going to be reference geometry. We are going to call it modeled wheel. Okay. We're going to parent it to the upright. Control P, parent. And we're going to add a constraint to it now. So select it, and then come over to constraints. We're going to do copy rotation. And we're going to pick our wheel rigid body. We're only going to do the Z angle, or axis. We're going to do after original, and we're going to do local space for both of these. Okay. All right, this is me from the future, and I discovered a little problem with the way we had this set up. And basically, the rotation would be correct, and then the vehicle would make a 180-degree turn, or maybe a 90-degree turn, and then the wheel rotation would be reversed. And it was causing problems, and it took me a little bit to figure it out, but we actually need to change the order on this copy rotation constraint to Z, X, Y. So the first thing is Z, and that's the important part. Later on in some of the videos, you might see me switching the direction, and you don't need to do that. Just look at what yours is doing, and as long as you have Z, X, Y, it should be correct. Save it. All right, now I need to add some reference cones. So I have my cursor where I want it. I'm going to do Shift A, and I'm going to do a mesh, a cone. I'm going to scale it 0.05. I'm going to rotate it along the Y, -90. And I'm going to move it along the X, 0.5. So G, X, 0.5. Okay. And you can just barely see it. So let's just move or scale down this motor a little bit. Doesn't matter what its size is. So there we have that. Let's name it. We're going to name it _X deflect. Okay. And let's make another one. So Shift A, mesh, cone, scale 0.05, R, X 90 to rotate it, and then G, Y 0.5. All right, so now we have our Y one, so let's name it _Y deflect. And we need one more. So Shift A, mesh, cone, scale 0.05. We're going to rotate it along the Y 180 degrees. Then we're going to move it along the Z 0.5. All right, there we have that one. Let's name it _Z deflect. All right, now let's select all three of these, and we're going to parent it to the upright. There we go. And we're done with that. So let's save it real quick. All right, now we have a bunch of work to do to our lattice. And it's going to be the shape keys and the drivers for the shape keys. So let's select our lattice and come down to the lattice properties panel. And I'm going to collapse that and try and bring this down so we can see more of them. We're going to add the basis shape key. So there it is. Press plus once to get that. And then we need 6 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they are going to be +X. So let's rename them. Minus x for all 6 directions, plus y, minus y, plus z, which we won't be using, but we'll add it anyway, and minus z. Okay? All right, let's start with our x shape key. So let's clear this out, or we're working with this area or with these objects. Let's just select those and say Shift H to isolate them. And we're going to be doing the X direction. So let's get a front view. So here's our lattice right here. And what we want to do is with this selected, the plus X, we want to select it in our lattice and then press Tab to get into edit mode. And let's turn on X-ray. And we want to change this shape key. So for the plus X, we actually want it to go in the minus X direction. So select the bottom ones. And what I like to do is move it over about half the width. So G, X, move it like that. And then the second row, G, X, move it almost as much. Generally, you don't want to move the top, or you don't really want to move the top row at all for any of these. Okay, so that's what it should look like. And we'll tab out of that. And let's go ahead and add our driver. So right click here and do add driver. And we'll show it in here. And the equation we're going to use is distance minus ref for reference divided by lattice height times 2. Okay, this should not be times 2, it should be times 10. Okay. So let's add our variables here. Let me get some more room. I can move this over. There we go. All right, so we want distance, and we want reference, and we want the lattice height. There we go. All right, so for the distance, we want that to be a distance, and we want it from the wheel to the X deflection, which is right here. There we go. And for the reference, we want it to be a distance also, and we want it from this modeled wheel reference right here and to the X deflect. There we go. And for the lattice height, that's going to be a single property, and it's going to be the lattice, of course, entire lattice, and we use scale.z. Okay, hopefully that works, and it does. So there's our first driver, and we can just copy it to the negative X, but we want to make it negative, like that. All right, now we can test it out. So I'm going to turn off X-ray, and we basically want the bottom, or the shape key, to kind of follow the direction of the wheel. So I'm going to grab the wheel, and I'm going to say G, X, and we're going to move it along the X. And it looks like it's working in one direction, but not the other. So let's see what's going on there. Oh, I know what's going on. We haven't, okay, sorry. We haven't done the shape key yet. Okay, let's do that. So I have it selected, and I'm going to come into a front view, sorry. So I have it selected. Let's go into X-ray. Let's tab into it, and then do G, X, and we'll move it this way this time. And the same thing, kind of like we did the other time. Okay. Now, let's turn off X-ray. Let's move it along the X both ways, and it follows it. So you should be doing this. Now we want to do the same thing with the Y. So let's make our shape key. So let's do +Y. Come into a side view for this one, and we'll tab into it and select the bottom one. And let's go G, Y, 0.1. Yeah. So GY 0.1. So that's the positive direction. And do the same thing. There we go. And let's just make this one too, the -y. So tab into it and do GY -1, 0.1. Okay. GY -0.1. And move the top or the middle one a little bit too. So something like that. Okay. All right, now we need the driver. So let's copy our X driver and just paste it in there. And then let's open in Drivers Editor. I'm gonna move this. All right, so now it's the same, except we need this to be Y deflect. So let's do Y deflect and Y deflect. All right, and you shouldn't have any errors. Looks good. Make sure it says +Y right here, and it does, so that should be good. All right, now we can copy that driver and paste it into the -Y. All we need to do is put a negative sign in front of it, and there we go. All right, let's test it out. So let's take the wheel and do GY, and it looks like it's going in the opposite direction that we want it to. All right, so let's just switch up our negative signs here. All right, so let's put a negative sign in front of this one. And let's take it out of this one. All right, let's test it out now. GY, yep, and yep. Okay, so that looks good. All right, let's do our Z. We're not going to do +Z because that's basically when the deflection of the tire when it's unloaded, which we're really not going to use. But we do want to do it when it's loaded. And this one has a little more complicated shape key. And all these shape keys you might want to adjust anyway, but let's do this one. So for this one, I like to select these bottom ones here, move them up, and then move all of them up to about right there. And then I like to select just these outer ones on each side and scale them. So SX2. All right. So that should give a pretty good approximation of what a deflected tire or a loaded tire looks like. All right. So I'm going to actually, I think let me select these again, and we only want this to go about right there, about half the, so it's about half the thickness. So this bottom one should be aligned basically with this middle row right here. Okay, so that should be good. Again, you can adjust that later on. All right, let's tab out of that, and let's just copy a driver. So copy and paste it into the Z, and then we want to open that in the driver's editor. And we want to change it up here. This should be ×2 instead of ×10. Okay, And then, of course, we want this to be Z deflect instead of Y deflect. Oops. And you want to make sure, yep, negative Z. Okay. So let's do that. Z deflect and Z deflect. There we go. All right, scale Z, everything should work. No errors. Don't need to use self. That doesn't really matter. And let's test it out. So let's select the wheel, move it up. GZ, and it compresses it. You're also going to get a little bit of lateral and longitudinal movement, but that's okay. Okay,